The officer's voice reached the sidewalk at 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday outside the Eastern District Precinct on the 1700 block of North Gay Street in Baltimore, Maryland. Loud enough that a man walking a dog on the far side of the street turned to look. "Ma'am, you need to leave. Right now." The woman he was speaking to did not leave. She did not step back. She reached into the bag on her shoulder and took out a spiral notebook. Black cover, college ruled. And she opened it to the first blank page, and she wrote the time at the top of it. 8:47 a.m. Then she wrote the date. Then she looked up at the officer and said, in a voice that had none of the volume his had and all of the weight, "Can I have your badge number, please?" He stared at her. "Badge number," she said. "For the record." It told her it was 2241. She wrote it down. She wrote the name from his tag, DUHB-K. She wrote the location. She was still writing when he said it again. "You need to leave this property." "I'm standing on a public sidewalk," she said. "I'm not on your property." She did not say it hotly. She sighed it the way you say something you have said many times. Something you learned to say precisely because imprecision is the thing that gets used against you. "I have an appointment with the precinct commander at 9:30 a.m. I have been here since 8:40 trying to have that appointment acknowledged. I would like to come inside." "Nobody told us about any appointment." "I understand," she said. "That is also in the notebook." He did not know what was in the notebook. He did not know who she was. He had no way of knowing from where he stood that the woman he was screaming at in front of the precinct on North Gay Street was the person that the city of Baltimore had appointed 7 weeks ago to hold his precinct accountable. That was the part he was going to find out. Adora Bright Okafor was 52 years old. She weighed 138 pounds, which was 9 pounds less than she had weighed 7 weeks ago. Before the call came from Director Mensah's office, and everything that had been a plan became a reality, and the appetite that had been reliable her whole adult life simply stopped showing up reliably. The 9 pounds were not a complaint. They were a measurement of how seriously she was taking the things she had been given to do. When the work was this large and this necessary, the body made its own adjustments. She was from Lagos originally, though she had left at 19 on a scholarship to Johns Hopkins and had lived in the United States for 33 years, the last 17 of them in Washington, D.C. She had spent 24 years as a civil rights attorney, first at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, then at her own two-partner firm on 14th Street, NW, and then 6 years as Deputy Inspector General for the D.C. Office of Police Complaints, which was where she had learned that the practice of law and the architecture of accountability were related but not identical, and that the second one was harder and mattered more. She had been appointed to the Baltimore City Civilian Police Accountability Board 8 weeks ago. She had been confirmed by the City Council 6 weeks ago. She had started on a Monday. Today was Wednesday of her second week. She was wearing a dark wool coat over a charcoal blazer and a white shirt, black trousers, and boots with a low heel that she had chosen that morning not for the occasion but for the walk. The precinct was 11 minutes from the parking garage on the 1800 block, and she had intended to use those 11 minutes to read through the section of the Baltimore Complaint Review, protocol that she already knew was wrong, and that she had come specifically to begin assessing. She carried a black canvas bag on her left shoulder. Inside it were the spiral notebook, now open, a printed copy of her appointment letter, laminated, which she had placed in the outer pocket of the bag that morning because she had expected she might need it, and a copy of the Baltimore Police Department's current civilian complaint review procedures, the 2021 version, with 6 pages marked with yellow tabs at the places where the language fell short of what the process required. In the front pocket of her coat, in a small zippered pouch, was a pen, a blue Bic ballpoint, the standard kind, the kind you can buy 10 for $1 at any pharmacy. This one had been given to her by a woman named Blessing Owusu on a Thursday afternoon in October 1999. In the corridor outside a hearing room at the D.C. Office of Administrative Hearings, 20 minutes after Adaura had won her very first civil rights complaint proceeding. Blessing Owusu had pressed the pen into her hand without ceremony and said, in Twi, that Adora understood only partially and filled in from context. Keep it. Adora had kept it for 24 years. She used it to sign things that mattered. She did not use it for anything else. The appointment at 9:30 a.m. was not a courtesy visit. It was the first formal step in a precinct-level review that she had been authorized to conduct under Baltimore City Ordinance 220154, which established the Civilian Police Accountability Board and granted its commissioner the authority to conduct unannounced or announced visits, review complaint records, and assess compliance with departmental procedures. She had made the appointment announced, not unannounced, because she believed in giving people the chance to be ready. She had sent a confirmation letter 4 days ago. She had called the precinct commander's office to confirm on Monday. She had been told everything was set. She had arrived at 8:40 a.m. with 20 minutes to spare because she had learned in 30 years of doing this kind of work that the 20 minutes before a meeting were sometimes the most informative part of it. She had not yet gotten past the front step. Officer K. Webb, badge 2241, had been at the Eastern District Precinct for 11 years. He knew this building the way you know a place that has been the center of your working life for more than a decade. Every entrance, every procedure, every protocol for who came in and who didn't. It was 43 years old, broad across the chest, with a particular quality of attention that comes from years of watching a single location for anything that didn't fit the pattern. It was not a man who looked for trouble. It was a man who recognized departures from what he knew. And this woman with the spiral notebook and the canvas bag had been standing outside his precinct since 8:40 a.m. Without a uniform, without an escort, without a patrol car, and without any identification that connected to any expectation he had been given. The duty sergeant, a woman named Sergeant J. Alston, who had been on since 6 a.m., had gone inside to check the log when Adora first arrived. She had come back out 2 minutes later and said there was no appointment in the log. Adora had given her the confirmation letter. Sergeant Alston had looked at it, taken it inside, and not come back out. That had been 14 minutes ago. Officer Webb had come to the front step when he saw the woman still standing there at 8:47. He had seen the notebook go into the bag and come back out. He had seen her writing. He did not know what she was writing. He knew that an unescorted civilian standing outside his precinct for 7 minutes writing in a notebook was not the expected pattern. And when the expected pattern was disrupted, he was trained to address it. He addressed it loudly. He addressed it loud enough that it carried half a block in both directions and came back off the brick face of the building across the street with a faint flat echo, the way sound travels on a cold morning when there is nothing soft to absorb it. Adaura wrote it down. Not the volume. You cannot measure volume in a notebook entry, and she had learned long ago that the most important details were the ones that could be verified, not the ones that conveyed how something felt. She wrote, 8:47 a.m. Officer K. Webb, badge 2241. Directed subject to leave property in raised voice. Subject standing on public sidewalk. Duration of exchange. Ongoing. 4 other officers came and went through the front entrance during the 9 minutes she stood on the sidewalk. The first 2 were coming on shift, in uniform, with their caps on and their eyes forward. The practiced forward gaze of people who had learned that looking at a thing meant being asked about it. The third was a detective in plain clothes, a man in his 40s with a coffee in one hand and a folder tucked under his arm, who looked at Adora for 1 full second as he pushed through the door. A look that was assessment without conclusion. The kind of look you give something that does not fit the category you have for it. The fourth was a woman in civilian clothes, not an officer, who held the door for someone behind her without looking back to see who was there, and went inside. Not one of them said anything. Sergeant J. Alston came back out at 8:51 a.m. She was a compact woman in her mid-40s with a lanyard carrying 3 key cards and a way of delivering information that had had all the texture pressed out of it by years of delivering information that nobody was happy to receive. The commander's in a meeting, she said. You'll need to schedule through the administrative office. I have a confirmation, Adora said. I sent it 4 days ago. I called to confirm on Monday. The person I spoke to confirmed the 9:30. Sergeant Alston looked at the laminated letter Adora had taken from the outer pocket of her bag. She looked at it the way you look at a document you have been told to look at but not to act on. I'll check again, she said, and went back inside. She did not come back out. A woman sitting on the bench to the left of the entrance, beside a concrete planter that had been empty since September, watched all of it. The Northgate Street precinct exterior in November smelled of exhaust from the bus stop half a block south and something colder underneath. The particular smell of a city block that receives no direct sun until afternoon, where the concrete of the building face holds the cold the way stone holds it and releases it slowly all morning into the air in front of it. The wind off the harbor was moving up Gay Street from the south in short gusts that came about every 90 seconds, carrying newspaper print and the smell of the water 2 miles away. Adaura's coat was warm enough, but the boots she had chosen for the walk were not insulated, and her feet had known it since she stopped moving. She had been standing still for 17 minutes. She did not move to a warmer spot. She stayed where she was, and she continued to write in the notebook. She was writing what she observed: the number of officers who had passed without making eye contact, the duration since Sergeant Alston had taken the letter inside, the volume Officer Webb had used, the specific words. She wrote it in the factual shorthand she had developed over 24 years in rooms and corridors and hearing chambers where the record was the only thing that survived. Precise, unembellished, sequential. Every sentence was a documented observation. None of them contained the word she was actually feeling, which was familiar, because she had stood outside enough buildings that were not going to let her in, that the feeling had become a kind of information rather than a wound. She was on her second page of notes when the woman on the bench spoke. "They're not going to call you in," the woman said. "Not until they find out who told you. And they won't find that out by calling upstairs. They'll just keep sending Alston back out." Adora looked at her. "I've been coming here every Wednesday for 3 years," the woman said. "I know how Alston moves when she's buying time. If this is landing where I think it's landing, stay with me. Because what this woman on this bench knows, and who she calls, is what changes everything about what happens at 9:30 a.m. Her name was Willa Mae Owens. She was 71 years old, 5'2", wearing a heavy brown coat over a house dress and carrying a canvas bag of her own, smaller than Adora's, worn at the strap, that she brought with her every Wednesday. She had the kind of face that had finished with expressions that cost energy and settled into the ones that were simply true: attentive, patient, unamused by the things that did not merit amusement. She smelled faintly of talcum powder and something warm, like a kitchen where something had been simmering. She had been coming to the Eastern District Precinct every Wednesday since November 3 years ago, when her grandson Marcos had been detained for 14 hours without charge and released without paperwork and without explanation, and she had decided that she was going to file a formal complaint every single week until something happened. In 3 years, she had filed 147 complaints. She had received 34 acknowledgement letters, 12 case numbers, and 3 follow-up calls. None of the complaints had been resolved in the way the ordinance said they should be resolved within 90 days. She had kept every letter, every case number, every note from every call in a red accordion folder that she brought with her each Wednesday, in case today was the day she needed it. She had also kept the City Council press release from 8 weeks ago, the one announcing the appointment of the new Baltimore City Civilian Police Accountability Board Commissioner. She had cut it out of the weekly community newsletter that the Eastern District Community Liaison dropped in the lobby of her building on Biddle Street every other Friday. It was folded in the front pocket of her brown coat because it had been there since the day she read it, and she had never had a reason to take it out. She looked at Adaora's coat. She looked at the canvas bag. She looked at the notebook. "What's your name?" she said. Adaora told her. Willa Mae Owens was still for 3 seconds. Then she put her hand into the front pocket of her brown coat, and she took out the folded press release, and she unfolded it on her knee, and she looked at it, and looked at Adaora, and looked at it again. The photograph was small and printed on newsprint, and not high quality, but it was recognizable. She refolded the press release and put it back in her pocket. "You're the one they just appointed," she said. "Yes," Adora said. Willa Mae looked at the precinct entrance. She looked at Officer Webb, who was still on the front step. She looked at Adaora's notebook. Then she took out her phone and she made a call. And the call lasted 1 minute and 53 seconds. And when it was over, she put the phone back in her pocket and sat with her hands folded in her lap and said, "Someone's coming." The someone was Director Colette Mensa. It was 58 years old, Baltimore City solicitor. The man who had built the legal framework for the Civilian Police Accountability Board over 4 years, and who had called Adaora personally to ask her to take the commissioner's role because he had watched her work in DC for 6 years, and because he believed that the person who fixed a broken system had to understand it from the inside before they could repair it from the outside. E drove himself. E arrived at 9:11 a.m. in a dark gray Audi S6, parked it in the tow zone in front of the precinct entrance without turning on hazards. An came up the steps with his hands in his coat pockets, moving without hurry the way a man moves when he is not hurrying because he does not need to. He looked at Officer Webb. He looked at Adaora. He looked at the notebook in her hands and the pages she had filled. He said to Officer Webb, "Open the door." 3 words. No introduction. No credential displayed. He did not need to display it. Officer Webb had seen the city solicitor on the news enough times to recognize a face that meant the next thing that happened here was going to be documented at a level that exceeded what his 11 years at this precinct had prepared him for. Officer Webb opened the door. Director Mensa held it. Adora walked through. She did not pause on the threshold. She walked the way she had walked into every building that had taken too long to let her in. Without ceremony, without triumph, with the particular forward motion of a person who has work to do and is now, finally, in the place where the work is. The precinct commander, a man named Captain B. Nwosu, no relación, a coincidences that would later strike Adora as the kind of thing Baltimore produced regularly, was located when they reached his office, at his desk, in a meeting with no one, eating a breakfast sandwich and reading something on a laptop screen. The meeting he was unavailable for had apparently concluded. Director Mensa stood in the doorway. He did not need to say anything. Captain Nwosu looked up, looked at the director, looked at Adaora, looked at the notebook she was still holding. "Commissioner Bright Okafor," Director Mensa said. She had a 9:30. Captain Nwosu put down the sandwich. The formal review of the Eastern District Precinct began that afternoon. Adora started with the complaint intake log, which she had requested by 10:15 a.m., and which was delivered to the conference room they gave her on the second floor at 11:40 a.m. She read it with the reading glasses she kept in the canvas bag. Her own prescription, wire-framed, bought at a pharmacy on Charles Street 2 years ago, and replaced once when she sat on them. And she found the gap in the first hour. It was not the gap she had come specifically to assess, though, that one was there too. This one was different. This one meant that any complaint filed by a civilian could be marked administratively closed within 14 days without review if a supervisor characterized it as a duplicate. And the characterization was not subject to any external check. She had seen this gap before. She had fixed it before. She had fixed it in Washington in 1997, and she had published the fix in a 2003 paper that the DC Office of Police Complaints still cited in its training materials. She wrote it in the notebook. She wrote the provision number, the language, the specific failure it created, and the fix. She wrote it in the same blue big ballpoint she had been carrying for 24 years. Then she turned the page and started on the next gap. Officer Webb was placed on administrative review 2 days after the incident. The review was still open when the precinct-wide Civilian Police Accountability Board orientation was scheduled. Every officer assigned to the Eastern District was required to attend one of 3 sessions held over the following 30 days. The sessions covered what the board was, what its authority was, and what the legal standing of its commissioner was when she appeared at the front step of a precinct at 8:40 a.m. with an appointment and a notebook. Session 1 was held on a Wednesday. Willamai Owens came that morning at 8:30 a.m., early, which was unusual even for her, and sat on the bench by the empty planter and watched the officers go in for the session. She did not go in. She was not required to attend. But she had been coming here every Wednesday for 3 years, and today was Wednesday and she was not going to change the pattern now. She waited until the session was over, and she filed her complaint, and she went home on the 13 bus, and she put the week's acknowledgement letter in the red accordion folder and went to make dinner. The complaint she filed that Wednesday was the 148th. It was the first one that came back with a case number already assigned, a reviewer already named, and a response date that was 89 days from filing rather than pending. She read the letter twice at the kitchen table. She put it in the folder. She did not celebrate exactly, but when she made her tea that evening, she made it in the good cup The blue one with the gold rim that she kept on the top shelf and used for occasions that deserved it, and she stood at the window with it and looked at the street below and let herself feel, for a few minutes, what it meant when a system that had been broken for 3 years showed the first sign of beginning to repair itself. Adora had scheduled the 9:30 a.m. appointment announced because she believed people deserved the chance to be ready. What she found at 8:40 a.m. on a Wednesday told her what that precinct was when it was not ready. What she found between 10:15 a.m. and the end of the day told her exactly what needed to be fixed and exactly how to fix it. She had fixed it before. She had written the paper. She had trained the people who trained the people who were currently getting it wrong. She had carried the pen that signed the first decision of her career for 24 years, and she was going to use it to sign the compliance order that corrected this one. And when she signed it, she was going to sign it at the table on the second floor of the Eastern District Precinct, where she had read the log that morning with her wire-framed glasses from Charles Street. They could not keep her outside the building forever. She had the notebook, she had the appointment, she had the authority, and she had 30 years of knowing exactly what to do with all three. Some people think that power looks like the person who stands in the doorway and refuses to let you through. That kind of power makes noise. It calls out from front steps. It fills hallways and lobbies and the air outside buildings that it has decided belong to it. But real authority does not make that kind of noise. Real authority arrives at 8:40 a.m. with 20 minutes to spare and opens a notebook and starts writing. Real authority does not need the door to open immediately. It can stand on a public sidewalk in November with cold feet and a pen that belonged to the first person it ever fought for, and it can document everything, and it can wait. You cannot scream someone away from work that the city itself has given her to do. You can delay her by 14 minutes. You can send the sergeant back out twice. You can stand on the step and fill the air with your voice until the man walking the dog across the street turns to look. But the notebook is filling, and the appointment is written down. And the woman holding both of them already knows exactly what is wrong with the building she is standing outside of, because she has seen it before. And she fixed it before, and she came here on day 2 of her appointment, specifically because she does not wait to do the work that is hers to do. Here's what I want you to think about. If you were handed authority over the very system that had once made you stand outside in the cold, would you come in quietly and fix what was broken? Or would you need them to feel what you felt first? There is no wrong answer, but there is a true one. Leave it in the comments. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.